Curley Boo Johnson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Johnson, after you flew in yesterday, we spoke in our office about this proceeding today, and I think I told you that I was going to have to ask you some questions about a petition and order we were going to be submitting to the judge before you testified. Did you understand that?
Yes.
Did you understand the nature of the petition and order was a petition we were going to be providing to the judge, asking the judge to enter an order granting you use immunity from any testimony you might give here today? Was that your understanding?
Yes.
And is it my understanding that this request resulted from advice that you received from your personal attorney in response to the request from my office to seek your statement and your testimony at trial? Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Did he provide you advice indicating that he thought that before you testify you should seek to have immunity in this case?
Yes.
And is it my understanding that on the advice of counsel that if immunity was not granted to you by the court, you would choose to exercise your constitutional rights and privileges and refuse to answer questions involving the charges that the defendant is facing here today in court? Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And would that also apply to any questions that defense attorneys might ask you on cross-examination as well? Would you, without immunity, would you again seek to invoke your constitutional rights not to give answers to questions?
Well, that first question, the one before this, are you asking me would I have testified without the immunity?
No, what I'm asking you is, upon your attorney's advice, would you testify without immunity?
No.
Okay.
Stan, any questions?
And would that also include questions on cross-examination?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I'm satisfied that the witness would not testify in this case without the grant of the immunity, and he does have the privilege to do so, and so I'll grant the application for the immunity so that we can gain his testimony in this trial.
On the stand right now, Curley Boo Johnson, Harlem Globetrotter, the guy who got the tickets for Kent Kaluko. As you recall, Kent Kaluko is the guy that invited Jayson Williams to the game. Let's go back in.
Stage at halftime, or back to the locker room with several people, and I met him then.
When you say they, who are you talking about?
Kent Kaluko, John Gordnick, and his children who I knew, John Portland, and some other people.
Was the defendant there too?
Yes.
Why don't we explain to the jury what your background is with some of the witnesses that you just mentioned? You indicated that you knew John Gordnick. How do you know John Gordnick?
When I used to play basketball, when I was living in New York, we used to go to New Jersey. Kent would pick me up and I'd go over there and play basketball a couple of nights. And John Gordnick was one of the people who ran the gym that we played at, and that's how I met him. And I also met his wife and his 3 kids. And John McPortland, is that his?
Before we go into Mr. McPartland, let me ask you a few questions about Mr. Gordnick's kids. How did you know Mr. Gordnick's children?
Because they like to play basketball, and I believe one of his sons was a fan of me.
Okay. Now, as far as Mr. McPartland is concerned, how did you know Mr. McPartland?
From playing basketball against him, and he also played against my college when he was in college playing ball.
Okay. Did you know any of the other individuals that were there at halftime?
I knew Kent's brother Craig.
You had met Craig Kaluko before then?
Yes.
Where was it that you all met?
In the locker room.
And do you remember who else from the Globetrotters was there when you met all of these individuals?
The entire team. The entire team was in the locker room at halftime, including my coaches.
Now, when you met the defendant at halftime, was there any discussion concerning what would happen after the Globetrotter game?
He invited us to have dinner with him.
When you say us, who are you talking about?
The entire team.
Was it just your team that was invited for dinner?
I believe he invited the team that we were playing against, too.
And what was your understanding of where you were going to be going to dinner?
At Jayson Williams' restaurant, at his restaurant.
Who did you think was going to be paying for dinner?
Jayson Williams.
Now, who originally from the Globetrotters was going to be attending this dinner? Do you know?
The entire team wanted to go.
Did the entire team go?
No,
Why not?
because after the game, our bus malfunctioned, and our trip to our hotel was delayed about an hour.
What was your understanding, Mr. Johnson, about how it was that you were going to drive from your hotel to the restaurant?
That we were going to be picked up in a limo.
In a limousine?
Limousine.
How did it come about that you were going to be picked up in a limousine?
Ken had called me on my cell phone and said, "Can the Globetrotter bus bring you guys, to the restaurant?" And I said, well, the bus is only allowed to take us from the hotel to the game. So he said, "Well, we're going to send a limo to pick you guys up." So that was my understanding, that a limo was going to pick us up. But like I said, I thought everybody was going.
Now, what time would you say, knowing that you're not going to remember exactly what time, but approximately what time would you say you got back to the hotel you were staying at?
I can't recall.
Once you arrived back at the hotel, what happened?
Well, right when we were pulling up to the hotel, I noticed the limo van parked in the parking lot, and I got off the bus, and the limo driver, Mr. Christoffi, he stepped out of the van to greet me.
Did he introduce himself to you?
Yes, I came over to him, and he introduced himself as Gus, and I said, "I'm Curley Boo," and
And what did you do after you met Gus?
I told him that I had to take my gym bag upstairs, and I would come back down as fast as I could,
Why did you want to come down so quickly, Mr. Johnson?
because I didn't want him to wait that long.
Did you come back down after dropping off your bag?
Yes, I did.
And what happened after you came back downstairs?
I noticed that some of my teammates weren't going. They were going to stay because it was late.
So, of all the Globetrotters, who ended up going to the restaurant?
Myself, Chris Morris, Benoit Benjamin, Showtime, Paul Gaffney.
Okay. You said Paul Gaffney, Showtime. Is that how you know him?
Yeah, that's what I call him every day. But Paul Gaffney, sorry.
Where in the van did you sit on the ride from the hotel to the restaurant?
I sat next to Mr. Christoffi
So that would be in the front seat?
in the front seat.
On the way to the restaurant, did you converse with Gus?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe how Gus was, his demeanor, while he was driving you and the other Globetrotters?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance to that.
Judge, it goes to the ultimate sports fan, taking pictures. But I'm trying to do it without the hearsay.
Your Honor, we're really far afield. His demeanor when he's driving to the restaurant.
Sustaining objection.
Did you notice if Gus had anything with him in the van?
A camera, disposable camera.
And did you know what he was going to be doing with that camera?
Yes.
What?
He wanted to take pictures of the Globetrotters and of Jayson.
Why was that?
Objection. Yeah, no, why was that?
Welcome back to both sides in our live coverage of the Jayson Williams trial. On the stand, Curley Boo Johnson, Harlem Globetrotter. Let's take a look.
Defendant sitting in relationship to you.
He was sitting about where this officer is here.
Did you make
Or
any...
trooper. I'm sorry.
Sheriff's officer, I think.
Sheriff's officer.
Did you make any observations of whether or not the defendant was drinking that night?
No. I didn't see him take a drink to his mouth.
Do you know if he had any alcohol in front of him?
Yes.
Now, you said at first you didn't know if Gus was there, but there came a point in time when you realized that Gus was there.
Yes.
When did that happen?
I noticed that he was sitting down, not far from me.
I think we had a distance of record between the witness and the sheriff's officer. 6 to 8 feet?
6 to 8 feet.
Okay, so when you're saying 6 to 8 feet, you're talking about you and the defendant?
Yes.
That would be how far you guys were apart?
Yes.
Can you estimate about how far in feet you were apart from Gus and where he was seated?
No more than 6 feet.
Now, I see you looking in that direction.
Yeah.
Why are you looking in that direction?
Because that's the direction Jason, I mean, not Jason, but Mr. Christoffi was.
Okay. And when you said you were seated at the end of the table, so if this was at the end of the table, where would Gus be?
You mean like where that lady right there is sitting?
Yes, Miss
That's
Larson.
me?
That would be you. Where would Gus be sitting in relationship to where you were at?
You want me to show you?
Sure. You can come down and show us.
About right here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Judge, I would say that's about 6 feet.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson, were you able to see Gus without any obstructions between you and Gus?
Yes.
You were indicating that he would be off to your left
Exactly.
and the defendant, Jayson Williams, be off to your right?
Yes.
Okay. Is he on the same side of the table you are?
Yes.
You're talking about the defendant is on the same side of the table as you?
Exactly.
When you saw Gus sitting at the table, did you notice if he had anything to drink?
I believe he was drinking coffee.
Could you see that?
Yes.
And at that point that you observed Mr. Christoffi drinking coffee, did you notice if he was eating anything?
He was not eating.
Did there come a point in time during that evening when you saw an exchange occur between the defendant and Gus Christoffi?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury what happened?
Well, we were telling stories, and everyone had their own story to tell about their career and certain things that had happened on the road or in the NBA. And Jayson was telling a story, and all of a sudden, he turned to Mr. Christoffi and was like, what do you want me to say?
I know you don't want to use that language, Mr. Johnson, but I would need you to say exactly what you heard the defendant say.
Okay, what the fuck are you doing here? How the fuck did you get in here? And everyone got quiet.
The room got quiet?
Yeah.
Did you look at Gus when the defendant said that to Gus?
I kind of looked at both of them. Kind of, sort of like that.
The tone in which the defendant said it, was it serious or joking?
Serious at first.
Okay. And what did Gus do after the defendant said those words to him?
He stood up and was getting ready to leave.
Did you notice the expression on Gus's face?
Yes.
What was it?
He was shocked.
After Gus stood up and was getting ready to leave, did you hear anything else that the defendant said?
He said, I'm just fucking with you. Go home and get your shine box.
Did you understand what go home and get your shine box meant?
Yes.
What did that mean to you?
It's from a movie called The Goodfellas, one I've seen probably 20 times.
After the defendant said he was messing or fucking with Gus, go get your shine box, what did Gus do?
He sat back down. Yeah. Jayson offered, he's like, sit down, let me buy you a drink, buy you dinner.
You said you already indicated to the jury that you were telling stories about the NBA and about playing basketball. At some point when you were telling these stories, did you see the defendant do something with his clothes?
Yeah.
What did he do?
He took part of them off.
How did he do that?
He unbuttoned his shirt, unbuttoned his pants so he could untuck his shirt.
What part of his clothing did he remove?
He didn't remove, he just unbuttoned the shirt. And when he unbuckled his pants fell down.
Did you see what the defendant was wearing underneath his pants?
Some basketball shorts, I think, yeah.
Now, there came a point in time where there was a discussion about what you were going to do after the game. What was that discussion about? I mean, after you left the restaurant.
Well, when we finished eating, Jayson wanted to show us his home, his estate.
And how did that come about?
He said, man, I got to show you my crib.
And how did it come about that you and the other Globetrotters decided to go?
Well, we decided collectively. We weren't going to split up, and we all decided to go, even though I was tired. But I didn't have to get up very early the next morning because we didn't have a leave time until 2:30 in the afternoon. At 2:30 in the afternoon, I accepted the invitation.
How was it that you drove from the restaurant to the defendant's house?
We drove in Jayson's new...
Welcome back to Both Sides. We're going to take a quick break and go down to the Court TV News Center where Gene Casares is standing by.
Harlem Globetrotter Curley Boo Johnson on the stand. Let's take you back in live.
He took us to a barn, a big building that had many cars in it.
Did you see some of those cars?
Yes.
Did you see them up close and personal?
Yes, in fact, I got into some of the cars.
What did you do when you were inside the car?
Just sat there and admired the beauty of some of the different eras of cars.
How long would you say, approximately, that you and the other Globetrotters and the defendant were driving around outside?
Touring the estate, how long we...
Yeah, outside, before you went inside.
Okay. Half an hour?
When you were finished touring the outside of the defendant's property, what did you do?
We went to the main house, I guess you would call it.
Push that microphone back
I'm
a
sorry.
little bit.
Push it back?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. My first time.
Gotta think of the new guy.
My first time.
I think that's fine, though, where you're at right now.
Okay.
And I believe the jury will let us know if they can't hear you. You indicated that you went back to the main house. Do you recall what you did once you got back to the main house?
Well, once we pulled up, we went inside the house.
Do you remember where you were as far as in the line of people going into the defendant's house?
I was bringing up the rear. I walked very slow.
Once you got into the main part of the house, what did you do?
I started to walk, follow my teammates.
Do you remember some of the stuff that you looked at when you first got there?
I was just starting to walk in the house, and I started walking to the study. Or office, study, office.
Before you went into the study, did you look at anything else in the main part of the house
No,
that you can recall?
no, not that I recall.
When you walked into the study, who did you see inside of the study? If you can recall.
I don't remember exactly who I saw in the study.
Did you know if there were people in the study?
Yes, but I don't remember exactly who.
Is
I
there a
just remember
reason?
that they were white.
Is there a reason that you don't remember everyone that was in there?
Well, if I'd have known what was going to happen that night, I think I would have made a point to try to remember
Objection, Your
everything.
Honor, that's not without speculation.
Sustain the objection.
I'll ask it this way, Mr. Johnson. When you walked into, you said the study, the office, the study.
Right.
What did you say?
When I first started to walk in, I saw Jayson
Where was the defendant?
in his bedroom.
From where you were standing in the office, how far would you say that you were into the office when you first saw the defendant?
I'd say I was probably 4 feet away from the entrance to his bedroom.
So you were closer to the, so you were 4 feet away from going into the bedroom?
I was starting to walk up when I saw him.
So your plan is you're walking into the bedroom. Is that what you're telling us?
I was walking in and I saw him. I didn't get a chance to go to the bedroom.
But that's where you're walking to.
Yeah, I was walking
Okay.
that direction.
Okay. As you're walking towards the bedroom, you said you saw the defendant. Where was the defendant?
He was standing up and he went into his gun cabinet.
You saw him go into the gun cabinet?
Yes.
What happened after the defendant went into his gun cabinet?
He pulled a gun out, a long gun,
Do you recall what kind of gun it was?
a rifle.
How was the defendant holding the gun when you saw it?
He grabbed it out of the gun cabinet like this.
For the record.
For the record, it looks like you have two hands. Did he have one hand or two hand on the gun?
Went and grabbed it.
Now you're starting to turn.
Yes.
Did you see the defendant turn?
Yes.
Which direction did he turn?
He turned my direction.
So when he turned in your direction, what did
I
you
turned
do?
the other direction,
What direction was that?
towards the bookshelf in the study.
Maybe you could just step down and describe for the jury exactly how it was that you turned in that room.
Okay. Okay. I was walking up, and when I saw him, this is the entrance to the room. Reached in, turned this way. As I was walking up, as soon as I saw him turn, I just
Okay, you can have a seat. Why was it that you turned in that direction, Mr. Johnson?
For the record, he's turned to the right.
Yes, to the right. Why was it that you turned to the right of the room?
because I don't like guns.
When you turned to the right, you said that you went over near the bookshelf?
Yeah, I started looking at pictures.
You started looking at pictures.
Right.
Did you look at anything else while you were looking at the pictures?
A bobblehead action figure of Jayson.
You actually looked at the figure? Did you pick it up?
Objection, leading, Your Honor.
Okay, what did you do with that action figure?
Yes, you can answer.
Pardon me? I touched it and looked at it, and that's when the blast went off.
Do you recall when the blast went off, if there was anybody else in the room with you at that point?
There was, I just don't remember exactly who it was. I can
Wait.
just, oh, go ahead.
When you heard that blast, did you know what it was?
Yeah, I knew exactly what it was when I heard the blast.
What did you think it was? Or what
It was
did you
a
know it
shotgun
was?
blast, or gun blast.
And what did you do when you heard that shotgun blast?
I was startled.
And after you were startled, what did you do?
I said to myself, why the fuck are they firing a gun in the house?
After saying that to yourself, what did you do?
I heard someone say, oh my God,
Do you know who said, "Oh my God"?
Jayson.
When you heard that, what did you do?
I was like, no way. There's no one. I hope nobody got hit. Then I started thinking selfishly. I started thinking,
Objection, Your Honor, to his own state of mind, just as to what was observed.
Counsel?
That's fine, Judge. I'll move on. Mr. Johnson, after you had these thoughts, did you go anywhere?
yes,
Where did you go?
I went to look and see what happened.
Did you see what happened?
Yes.
When you first went into the room, did you see the defendant?
Yes, he's the first person I saw.
What was the defendant doing when you saw him?
He had his hands on his head. Oh my God. You know.
Could you show us how he had his hands?
Oh my God. Oh shit. You know.
Did he say anything else that you recall?
Are you okay? I fucked up my life.
Was he standing at the point that you saw him?
Yes.
Did you see anything else in the room?
I looked down and I saw Gus.
What did you do when you saw Gus, Mr. Johnson?
I paused for a second, then I knelt down to him.
Did you actually see Mr. Christofi?
Yes, I tried to talk to him.
What did
I
you
yelled out to
say?
him, Gus, are you okay? Gus didn't respond.
Did you actually make observations of him?
Yes,
What were those observations?
his eyes were clenched shut. I remember the wrinkles of his eyes clenched shut. He was gasping for air. And I looked down at his chest and I saw that his shirt started to saturate in red blood.
What did you do at that point?
I still tried to talk to him, and the tension in his face, it eased, it subsided, and I didn't see him gasp anymore. And at that time, I just said, hell no. And I ran out of there pretty fast.
Mr. Johnson, when you were down with Gus, Mr. Christofi, and you were making these observations and trying to talk to him, were you aware of anything else that was going on in the room at that time?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
It's okay. I understand. When you were down with Gus, seeing if he was okay and watching this happen, did you notice where the defendant was at that point?
He was behind me.
Did you notice where anyone else was?
No.
Did you see, while you were down with Gus, the defendant do anything with Gus?
No.
When you said that you saw Gus not breathing so hard, or you thought that you didn't see him breathing, and then you ran out of the room, where did you go?
Outside,
Why did you go outside?
looking for a direction to go to Chicago.
And what did you do once you got outside?
I tried to call somebody.
Who did you try to call?
My coach, my mentor, father figure, Tex Harrison. He's my coach, the guy that hired me.
Were you able to get in touch with Tex Harrison?
Not at first because I couldn't dial because I was shaking a little bit, and then I started to get cold, so I got back into the Bentley.
You got back into the defendant's Bentley?
Yes,
How did you get into the Bentley?
the car was open,
Where were you sitting when you got back into the Bentley?
the driver's seat.
And did you do anything with the car once you got into
I
it?
turned on the ignition and I turned on the heat as high as I could.
Were the keys still in the ignition?
Yes.
While you were sitting in the car, what else did you do?
That's when I calmed down and I called my coach to tell him what had happened.
Objection to hearsay, Your Honor.
Judge, I don't think he's
As to-
said anything here
As to
yet.
telling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going any further with that,
Yep.
Judge.
All right.
Other than calling your coach, did you call anyone else, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, I tried to call my teammates that were back at the hotel to let them know.
Same objection.
Same.
So you tried to call your teammates.
Yes.
Did you ever reach your teammates?
Yes.
Did you try to call anyone else?
No.
Now, were you alone in the Bentley at that point?
At that point, yes.
Did there come a point in time when that changed?
Yes.
What happened?
Welcome back to Both Sides. They are in a sidebar in the courtroom. We're going to bring in our guest today, criminal defense attorney Harlan Levy. Harlan, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Listen, I've got to tell you, to me, it seems like this testimony is coming off not only credible, but powerful. This is a likable, believable guy. What's your take?
He was charming from the word go, from when he didn't want to give his exact age. He's a very, very likable man, and it paints a horrific scene. There's no question that it shows the drama of what happened that night and the horror of what happened that night. At the same time, though, he's not a person who actually saw the incident.
Good point.
He was turned away. But what he does do is he does bring home that the man who died was a real person, that he was a guy who seemed to this witness like a lovely person, and that something really terrible that night happened. And I think also that his horror at guns, you contrast that to Jayson Williams playing with this gun. It sets up nicely the idea that someone who's acting in a way that is consistent with appropriate conduct would not be doing what Jayson Williams did that night.
That's such a great point, because there's such a juxtaposition between someone like Jayson Williams, who's showboating, having disrespect, using Gus as sort of his foil that evening to make fun, dropping his pants, showing off his body, almost driving into the lake. It's really no surprise, is what the prosecution is setting up for this witness, that these events unfolded the way that they did on this evening. And although, like you say, he wasn't the one who actually saw what happened, kind of just his comments about him running in and going to Gus's side and using Gus's name that evening really does make Jayson Williams not look too good. Vinny?
And Kimberly, I'm sorry, Vinny.
Go ahead.
Harlan, guess first. That's always the rule here on both sides. Go ahead.
Thank you, Vinny. And what you said about the lake, it just sets up the pattern of at least the prosecution's argument of a pattern of recklessness, of someone who's out of control that evening. Of course, the defense can say, well, he wasn't going to drive the car into the lake and he didn't mean to shoot the gun any more than that. And now, Vinny, you go, please.
Okay, well, the other thing I'm seeing taking place here, Harlan, is that the way he's testifying, he's setting up a picture where he, too, was victimized by Jayson Williams that night, having to be in that room and see a man die in front of him. And although, Gus Christophe is the true victim, this has affected this man's life and everyone else that was in that room that night. And it just makes Jayson Williams, I think, look a little more evil. Do you agree?
I agree, and I think that you even get the sense that this is the last place in the world, that this courtroom is the last place in the world that Curley Boo Johnson wants to be, the last place in the world that he wanted his life to lead to. And yet he's here because of Jayson Williams.
And what about the gripping testimony, Harlan, where he describes how visibly upset and shaken Paul Gaffney is? And he says, what could you tell? What were your observations? He says he was pale. Now, if that doesn't portray a picture to the jury of how upset these people were about what happened, I really don't know what does. I mean, how do you cross-examine your defense attorney, a witness like this that is so likable, the jury, any kind of opportunity to kind of laugh at something he says, they take, which shows me that they believe him and they like him. Where do you go from there?
I think what you try to do is you try to just cabin his testimony. You try to point out the things that he didn't see, the things that he didn't hear. There's no question that it was Jayson Williams who killed the victim that night, and you ultimately pin down that at the end of the day he doesn't add very much to what the jury knows about what actually happened.
Yeah, that's a great point, because he can't say whether or not this was an accident. He knows it's horrifying that he saw a man, bleed to death, get shot, and he was visibly upset by it. But he didn't say he was standing there, because he wasn't, so he couldn't tell whether or not Jayson was pointing the gun at Gus. He couldn't tell whether or not Gus was walking into the room, and he couldn't tell whether or not Jayson Williams looked down and saw whether there was a shotgun shell.
And the jury will know that. The jury will be very aware of that. Now, the reason that he didn't know is because his reaction was that of a responsible person. he was driven from that room by Jayson Williams.
Well, that's the ultimate issue for the jury to decide in this case. Was Jayson responsible or irresponsible and reckless in this case? We're going to take a quick break and bring you back. Welcome back to this expanded edition of Both Sides. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom.
And I'm Vinny Politan. We're going live into that Somerville, New Jersey courtroom where Jayson Williams is standing trial for manslaughter.
How did he say it?
Say that you were downstairs, but you weren't in the room.
How long would you say that you were in the dining room, Mr. Johnson, with the rest of the people?
Until they took us to the trooper barracks. The next, I can't remember exactly what time.
When you were in the dining room, was there a time when someone else came into the dining room?
Yes,
Who was that?
Jason's father.
Do you remember about what time it was that Jason's father or the defendant's father came into?
I don't remember exactly what time he came in.
What happened after the defendant's father came into the dining room?
He looked at Jayson.
You say he looked at him?
Yeah.
How did he look at him?
Objection, Your Honor. We discussed this.
Sustained.
Well, let me ask you this. After the defendant's father looked at him, what, if anything, did the defendant say?
I had nothing to do with it.
I'm sorry?
I had nothing to do with it.
Who was he saying that to?
His father.
You indicated that at some point you went to the police barracks.
Yes.
What did you do at the police barracks?
Well, I had to wait a long time because they took my 3 teammates in for questioning, and I was last, so I waited a long time.
Did you eventually provide the police with a sworn tape statement?
Yep. Yes.
And when you provided police with that statement, was that statement completely truthful?
No.
How wasn't it truthful?
I told them that I was downstairs
You
when I
told
was
them.
actually in the room adjacent to the bedroom.
Did you tell them that you were downstairs doing anything, the police?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
What, if anything, did you tell the police concerning what you were downstairs doing?
Say that one more time, please.
What, if anything, did you tell the police concerning what you were downstairs doing?
Playing pool, watching Chris and Benoit play pool, 8-ball.
Mr. Johnson, why was it that you were not completely truthful with the police?
Objection, relevance.
No,
Judge, it goes to
the
credibility.
circumstance of the case.
It goes to credibility.
It goes to the circumstance of this case. You can answer.
You can answer.
Will you repeat the question for me?
Yes. Why was it that you were not truthful with the police when you gave your statement that day?
A couple of reasons.
What are they?
Well, for one, I knew that there was different stories being told, and I didn't want to get the Globetrotters into any type of mess. I want to protect the name.
What was your other reason?
Other reason was I didn't want to be involved. And lastly, I didn't want to get on the bad side of Jayson.
Objection, Your Honor. Your Honor, I would move to strike.
Come stop.
Judge,
I mean, may we approach?
So here we have a sidebar taking place, and Kimberly, as we're here inside the courtroom, seeing what's taking place with this witness, this is the last Globetrotter to testify. This is the last eyewitness to the whole thing that took place that night. So really, we're kind of wrapping up the prosecution case, and you got to wonder, what can the defense do in terms of witnesses? They can't bring in eyewitnesses. We've heard them all already, so they've really got to rely on experts, and I think that's got to be the focus of the defense case.
I think you're right. I mean, it's going to be crucial, the testimony from Dr. Michael Bodden, et cetera, and their big witness, I think the biggest witness for them, obviously, is going to be Jayson Williams, because he has to be able to refute some of this testimony, critical evidence that's been presented against him by Benoit Benjamin, by Kent Kaluko, and somewhat by this witness as well, Curley Boo Johnson. I don't think Paul Gaffney was that much of a crucial witness. We've been getting some emails going both ways on it. Earlier, there was some analysis saying that he was important and did a great job for the prosecution. What did you think?
Well, I think the one thing that Gaffney did for the defense, really, was say that, you know what, I didn't see Gus Christofi in the room, and that's a huge fact for the defense. That's one fact that they need this jury to believe, or at least have some reasonable belief in it, that he wasn't necessarily in the room, that he was walking in the room, to find that reasonable doubt that he didn't point it intentionally at the victim in this case. Welcome back to Both Sides. Curley Boo Johnson still on the stand, still on direct testimony.
Objection, relevance.
Judge, it goes to his credibility and what he did or what he didn't do.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Did you ever call 911?
No.
Why not?
Objection, relevance.
Judge, obviously that's the next question I'm going to ask, is why he didn't call 911. It's relevant for the same reason it was
Yes,
just relevant.
I believe it is relevant. Go ahead.
Reason why I didn't call 911, I didn't know where I was. I had no idea if I was in the state of New Jersey or Pennsylvania. I didn't know where I was. I just knew I was at Jayson Williams' estate. I didn't know where I was.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I have no further questions at this time.
We're going to take a short recess, jury. I'm not going to send you downstairs because I want to try to keep this going, given the hour. I'd like to finish up at a decent hour, so why don't you step in the back? We'll try to take 5 minutes and come back and continue.
Judge, can I stay here?
Quick 5-minute break inside the courtroom as they get ready for cross-examination. We've got Harlan Levy with us for a few more moments. He's a criminal defense attorney. And, you know, when we look at this witness in total, what he did on direct examination, it seems that, to me, the worst thing that he did was just come off as a nice guy who was a victim that night, and that Jayson Williams was just acting in a way that he didn't think was appropriate either.
Yeah, I think that's right, Vinny. You know, he doesn't put the gun in Jayson Williams' hands. He doesn't put words in Jayson Williams' mouth that show an animus to the victim just before the shooting. He doesn't contribute to the key facts that would tend to prove that this was more a volitional act rather than an accident. On the other hand, he's a likable guy who's horrified. So at the end of the day, he's not going to be the most important witness in this case, but he's a significant witness because of what he does in terms of the atmospherics of the case.
And I think potentially when you look at the cross-examination, because this guy seems so eloquent, seems so likable, he's got a quick wit, he's difficult to cross-examine. You might want to get him on and off as quickly as possible as a criminal defense attorney, and, you know, take what you got during the direct and then kind of just run with it.
Vinny, I would join in that prediction. I think that you're going to see a very short cross-examination. I think it would be a mistake for them to jump in any detail here. I think what they'll do is they'll highlight the things that he didn't see that night, the things that he doesn't know about what happened that night, and get him on and off the stand.
Now, I think the one point, and Kimberly, I want to ask you first about this, the one point that came up on direct, sort of under the radar a little bit, but I think it could be really big for the defense, is the gun goes off, he goes down, he sees the victim, Gus Christofi, clenching, and then he sees him relax, and the message that he's sending to the jury is, I realize that's when this guy passed away.
Right.
And he ran out of the room. But that time period, the way he described it, seems so short that it's not Gus Christofi, fighting for his life on the floor, that he died pretty instantly. I think that is something that the defense could use.
No, I think you're right, because that also shows that maybe Jayson wasn't looking so bad, that he was trying to do other things because Gus was already dead, that he already passed away. So I think that is helpful, because otherwise it would seem very malicious and very callous if during that time when Gus is fighting for the last minutes of his life, Jayson's trying to save himself. Of course, we don't know for sure that's when he expired, but we saw the testimony that said his face relaxed. But also the fact that his eyes were clenched and kind of closed, I think it shows, the pain and obviously the situation that he was in, and could be interpreted too that he closed his eyes or clenched his face in that position because of the impact of the shot, because he knew it was coming.
Absolutely. Well, Harlan Levy, thank you so much for joining us today. You've got to go, but we're going to stay here and take you down to the Court TV News Center, where Gene Casares has all the way.
Bring back in Savannah Guthrie outside the Somerville Courthouse. Savannah, how's the jury reacting to this testimony?
I think they very much like this witness, just like they did Paul Gaffney earlier in the day. They're laughing when he makes his jokes. They're very interested in him. He's a very likable fellow, as you guys have been discussing. I have to say, I even noticed Jayson Williams and Billy Martin kind of cracking up at one of the things that Curley Boo Johnson said. He made a couple of jokes, and they seem to actually really be laughing and kind of having to make themselves stop laughing. So he's coming across well in this courtroom, and obviously giving some very vivid imagery of the last moments of Gus Christofi.